You might have heard the phrase, beware the Ides of March, but what does that actually mean? Today, we're going to talk about the day that Caesar died, the Ides of March. What are they? Well, the Ides of March means the middle of March, the 15th of March to be exact, and I'm specifically talking about 44 BC. What happened on that day, and how did it end up with Caesar's death? First of all, let's go and have a little look at who Julius Caesar was. Well, he was an incredible general, he was a fantastic politician, and he was a dictator. And I'm going to go just a little bit into each one of these aspects of his life and career before the fateful day, the Ides of March. As a general, he was very successful. Possibly one of the most important campaigns were his Gallic Wars, and the reason for that was that he wrote narratives, he wrote stories about those Gallic Wars, and he sent them back to Rome. They were in very clear language so that the masses could understand what he was saying about his wars. So effectively, he wrote his own propaganda about how amazing these wars were. So the people really, really liked him. He also, very importantly for people in Britain, he was the first person to try to conquer Britain. And he had lots of success as a general. He was, in fact, very triumphant. He didn't have his triumph in 59 BC. Instead, he decided to become a politician, a consul. So he had previously been in the priesthoods. He'd held very important priesthoods in the past. Some of them had been taken from him due to various things in his life, but he had been very important in the priestly life of Rome. That's very important for a politician. He had become consul in 59 BC, and because of this, he had given up his right to hold a triumph through the streets of Rome for the successes he had had. You can't be running for consul while you run an army, so he had to choose, and he picked to be a consul. So he put that ahead of his military career. Don't worry, he will go back and continue his military career after his year as a consul was over. Now, once he'd been consul, he went back into the military, and this gave him more protection from the law. As a consul, he couldn't be tried for any crimes people thought he had committed, and the same was true when he was ruling an army, so when he had imperium. However, he was worried that this protection would be taken from him, and so he and two other men set up something called the triumvirate, which means the 3-men rule. Now, it wasn't official, it wasn't sanctioned, but basically, between the 3 of them, Julius Caesar, Gnaeus Pompey, and Crassus, they ruled Rome. They had all the power, all the army, all the wealth, everything. So he became a triumvir. Unfortunately for the 3 of them, it was quite a shaky alliance, especially when Crassus died quite suddenly in the late 50s BC. And this put a bit of a strain on Pompey and Caesar's relationship. And this led to a civil war, which Caesar ultimately won. And he became dictator. Because of the civil war, he was elected very extreme powers. He was the person in charge of Rome on his own. So he had the civil war, which he won. He granted clemency to all the people who had fought against him. Now, this is a really good idea. I mean, it stops the war, doesn't it? Those who fought against him on Pompey's side were allowed to come back as long as they, apologized properly. And he had people to run the country again with him. Now, a dictator is an elected role, so he was elected to it. So that wasn't really a problem. The only thing was that the Romans really hated kings, and they didn't mind electing someone dictator for 6 months or even a year, but what they didn't like was when he got the title Dictator in perpetuo, which means dictator forever. So he has effectively been elected a king, in all but name. This is a problem. The Senate didn't like this because the Senate is the body of men who ruled Rome. And the Senate at this point in 44 BC was made up of Caesar's allies, so people who had fought with him in the civil war. They're on his side. But it's also filled with those people who have been overlooked because maybe they weren't particularly for or against Caesar or Pompey. And so these people feel like they have been passed over for positions of high power. So they are part of the Senate as well. And there are also the enemies that he has forgiven. These people that he gave clemency to who fought with Pompey against him. So it's a big mix of the Senate. And you may expect the real worry, the real danger to come from those forgiven enemies or maybe the overlooked. But actually, we are going to find out that some of Caesar's closest allies are also involved in a conspiracy to kill him. Now, there are lots of omens before the Ides of March. You have to remember that the Romans were a very superstitious people. So Caesar is getting lots of signs from the gods that something bad is going to happen to him. For example, some tablets were found, some bronze tablets, that said that when these tablets were found, that something terrible would happen to a descendant of Venus. Now, Julius Caesar claimed descent from Venus, and so maybe this is something to watch out for on his part. There are also two separate omens involving animals. The first one is the horses. Julius Caesar had some horses with which he had crossed the river Rubicon. This was in 49 BC, and lots of people say this was the beginning of the Civil War. He crossed into Italy, and the horses that he had crossed the river with, he had set free. He had let them sort of go to pasture, and they had been seen weeping and refusing to eat any grass. So people said this was very telling and very worrying, that his horses were weeping. The next one is the birds. Lots of different types of birds from all around the city converged on a single wren. The wren had flown into the Senate house with a laurel leaf in its mouth, and it was torn to pieces by these other birds. They attacked it in the Senate house. This one particularly is very interesting when you find out that Caesar was killed in the Senate house by lots of different senators, and he was wearing a laurel crown at the time. So this one could well be a very important sign if Caesar had listened to it. Then Calpurnia had lots of dreams. Calpurnia was Julius Caesar's wife, and she had, first of all, a dream that the gable end of their house collapsed. Kind of worrying, but not a big deal. Her next dream was Julius Caesar lying in her lap, having been stabbed in the chest. Kind of a more specific omen, you might say. So all of these things added together maybe made Caesar a little bit worried, and he was considering maybe staying at home on the 15th of March. Now, something that really is important to know about Caesar is that he is a little bit arrogant. He sort of had to be in order to rise through the ranks in Rome. But this next scene kind of gives you more of a flavour of who he is. So there's something called a haruspect. A haruspect is a soothsayer, someone who looks at the entrails of a sacrificial animal that's been sacrificed to the gods and tells you the future from those entrails. This haruspect was called Spurinna. According to Suetonius, he gave Caesar a warning, which we have in Suetonius, and some other authors also reference it, but it became famous because of William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare has Spurinna, the soothsayer, in his play Julius Caesar, saying, "Beware the Ides of March." And this has become quite a famous saying. Beware the Ides of March. So very strong statement. So all these omens have happened. We've had the omens from Calpurnia, the dream, we've had the birds and the horses and the tablets being found, and now a soothsayer who can see the future in the entrails has specifically said to Caesar, watch out, something's coming for you. So, how on earth did we get to the Senate House on the Ides of March if there have been all these warnings to Caesar? 15th of March comes. Caesar has decided he's not going to go to the Senate. He's kind of staying at home. However, lots and lots of senators have already gathered at the Senate House, and there's a rumour going round that they're going to crown Caesar king. His wife begs him not to go, especially because no favourable omens can be found. So the soothsayers who are outside the Senate House, they're reading the entrails of the sacrificial victims, and there are no good omens at all. Everything is bad. They keep sacrificing, and they keep checking different animals, and all the entrails are blackened and they are misformed, and this is not a good sign from the gods. However, Decimus Brutus comes along. Now, Decimus Brutus is not the most famous of the Brutus family to be involved in this story. Decimus Brutus is a younger cousin of the Brutus who we're going to talk about in a little bit. The famous Brutus, the et tu, Brute Brutus. Decimus Brutus is younger, and he is a very close friend of Julius Caesar. He's younger than Caesar. He almost looks up to him as an uncle, a father figure. Decimus Brutus comes to Caesar's house and says, listen, you're going to have to go to the Senate House. Everyone is waiting for you. Don't upset the Senate by not attending, because you're about to go off to war and they're going to have this memory of you as not doing what they want. And that's not a good thing, because then they won't vote you all the honours that you'll want. So he persuades Caesar to come on side. Then, as they are walking to the Senate House, a note is passed to Caesar. Now, on this note is a list of all the people who have been involved in the conspiracy to kill him. However, Caesar does not read the note. He puts it into a bundle of papers that is in his hand, in fact in his left hand, which is unlucky to the Romans, and he carries on walking. He doesn't read the note. So he gets to the Senate House, and this is what Suetonius says about his entry into the Senate House. Introit curiam spretare legione. He entered the Senate House ignoring the omens. That is key. This is part of the reason, in the Romans' mind, that Caesar kind of had to die. He is ignoring the omens, the signs from the gods. Spurinamque iridens et ut falsam arguens, and laughing at Spurinna, he is declaring him a fraud. So he is actively laughing at the spokesperson for the gods. Again, not a good idea in very superstitious Rome. And this is why he's laughing at him. Quod sine ulla sua noxa idus Martiae adescent. Because the Ides of March had come without any injury to him. So he says to Spurinna, listen, it's the Ides of March, it's the 15th. I'm fine. You said something bad would happen. Quamquam is venisse quedem eas diceret, sed non praeterisse. Though he, Spurinna, said, they had indeed come, but they have not yet passed by. So yes, well done, Caesar, you've made it to the Ides of March, but the Ides of March haven't finished yet. We still have time. So it's a very ominous little bit of Suetonius there. It's one of my favourite parts, so I put it in. So, we get into the Senate House. Julius Caesar is sat at the front on his chair, and the conspirators gather round him. Okay, lots of different senators are coming towards him with petitions, things for him to sign, requests. That's not uncommon. What is uncommon is when they draw the daggers, and one of the conspirators gets very, very close to him and tugs at his toga, and then brandishes a dagger. And supposedly, after he is stabbed for the first time, Caesar says, "Ista quidem vis est." This is violence, which is quite a dramatic thing to say after you've been stabbed. But that is what our historical sources tell us he said. Now, lots and lots of people were involved in this conspiracy. Over 60 senators said they would be involved in this conspiracy in some way or another. And Caesar is, in the end, stabbed 23 times. In order for them to share the blame, they each needed to stab Caesar. Now, it's obviously not everyone stabbed him. It's kind of like every group project you've ever done, in that some people don't necessarily pull their weight, but they still get the grade. Caesar is dead, and he lies on the floor of the Senate House in his own blood. Now, there's been quite a lot of discussion over the past 2,000 years about Caesar's final words. Now, the important thing is that these words are supposedly said to Marcus Junius Brutus, not Decimus Brutus, who led him to the Senate House. Marcus Junius Brutus had been pardoned by Caesar eventually. Actually, so had Decimus Brutus. Both of them had fought on Pompey's side. Both had been granted clemency by Caesar. But both of them are quite close to Caesar. Now, the reason most people know these words are because of Shakespeare. Et tu, Brute, Julius Caesar says as his last lines of the play. And you, Brutus, even you are stabbing me. However, in Suetonius, his final words are quoted as kai su teknon. Kai su teknon is Greek for and you, child, and you, my son, possibly revealing that this was his illegitimate child on his final moments. However, other people have pointed out, A, why would he speak in Greek in his final moments? B, if he has kept this a secret forever, why would he say it in his final breath? And C, possibly this was the other Brutus we're talking to. So, kind of a confusing amalgamation. But the most important thing is that the final words that everybody knows of Julius Caesar are Et tu, Brute, even you, Brutus. So Caesar has died. It's the 15th of March, 44 BC. Caesar has died. Now, is this a success against tyranny? The Roman senators at the time were worried that Caesar had too much power, was going too far, and didn't have enough checks against him. A small number, to be clear, a small number of senators conspired to kill him, and they did think people would rejoice. Wasn't necessarily what happened. In fact, you could say it wasn't a success against tyranny. You could say it's the catalyst for the Principate. The Principate are the emperors who come after. Because Julius Caesar's heir, his great-nephew Augustus, becomes the first official emperor of the Roman Empire. So possibly you could say that the conspirators actually got the opposite of what they wanted. They tried to kill a man who had too much power to stop him being a king, and instead they caused another civil war, and they left the door open in a way for Augustus to swoop in and pick up all the pieces. Whatever you think about the Ides of March, whether it was a success or a failure, you should celebrate it your way. On this 15th of March, make sure you're doing something to remember Caesar. It's just a good reason to have a gathering and to play games or to eat food. Find some way to celebrate the Ides of March. Why not? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Bambasbat.